Okay, welcome everyone to ANC 34G's regular meeting on the fourth Monday in April. We're glad to have everyone here tonight. I am Randy Speck. I'm the chair of the commission. I am the single member district commissioner for District 34G03. And that's basically the area between Nebraska and Utah and Broad Branch. And we'll begin by introducing the other commissioners. And Connie, you want to begin?
Sure. My name is Connie Chang. I'm the commissioner for ANC 34G Single Member District number 5, which begins on Legation Street on the east side of Connecticut, going up around Western, down Broad Branch Road. And then there's a little patch where it goes from Nevada and Chevy Chase Parkway down to Jocelyn. It's nice to be here. Thank you for coming.
John?
Okay, I'm John Higgins. I am the commissioner for ANC 3G02, which extends from Military to Neverfoil, north to south, and from Oregon Avenue to Utah, east to west.
Peter.
I'm Peter Gosselin. I represent District 6, which is the neighborhood on the west side of Connecticut back to 41st Street, from Western Avenue and the Chevy Chase Circle to Military Road, and the peninsula to the east going to Chevy Chase Parkway between Kanawha and Legation. And I welcome everyone.
Michael.
I'm Michael Zeldin. I'm 3G04, which is Lafayette over to Western and bounded by Broad Branch and Utah and Chevy Chase Parkway. The heart of my district is around Lafayette Elementary.
Chaz?
Sure, my name is Chaz Cadwell. I'm in the single member district 07, which is the southwest corner of the ANC, bounded by Reno, roughly by Reno, Military, Nebraska, and a little sliver of Nevada Avenue.
And Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore. I'm the commissioner for ANC 34G01, which is all of Hawthorne and portions of Barnaby Woods. And my SMD runs from Oregon Avenue to Western, down past Pinehurst Circle, around up through Beach, over the Pinehurst tributary, and picking back up Oregon Avenue until it meets Western. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay, we have.
And Randy, just to let the public know, I'll be on and off camera for a little bit.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for everyone coming. We have all 7 commissioners here tonight, so we have a quorum and we can conduct business. Our agenda tonight is related to primarily just this draft small area plan, and we're going to spend most of our time on that tonight. The meeting, of course, is being held virtually again, and because we've had some problems with some inappropriate comments from some people who've joined the meeting, we've begun to require registration. And so anyone who has registered then can join the meeting as an attendee. The commissioners will have audio and video throughout the meeting. And if there is an occasion when we want to recognize someone who is attending, we'll make them a panelist and have audio and video as well. During the meeting tonight, if you have comments, please put them in the chat. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them as best we can. We're going to describe a little bit later the procedure that we're going to follow for the session when we're going to be talking about the small area plan. So we'll get to that later in the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel probably tomorrow. Okay, the first item we need to take care of is to adopt the agenda. The agenda has been posted on our website and on various social media. Is there any modification or change anyone wants to
When she comes back.
to the agenda?
Okay, wonderful. We had a nice time.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to see if I can mute John.
I muted him already.
Good.
All right. Thank you. Okay, is there any modification or change anyone has to the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the agenda? 7-0. All right, the first item as usual is for announcements. Commissioner announcements first, and then we'll have community announcements. I only have a couple tonight. The first is with regard to Temple Sinai, which is in my single member district. They have been contemplating some construction there for some time. It was planned even before the pandemic, but the pandemic sort of put everything on hold. But they now have received permits to build approximately 9,000 square foot addition. It's within the footprint of their developed property, but it's going to be adjacent to the playground and the south entrance. And this development will make the building more functional and at the same time improve stormwater management and beautify the south end of the property. The temple will be holding an information session for those in the community who would like to learn more about the project, to see the plans and to hear about the important logistics plans both during and after construction. And they'll be able to ask questions as well. They anticipate holding this neighborhood meeting sometime in mid to late May. It'll probably be a hybrid meeting where you can be there in person or participate virtually. And the ANC will be distributing information about that meeting as it becomes available to us. The project itself is expected to take about 15 months and will run from approximately June of 2022 through August or September of 2023. So those of you particularly who live in that immediately adjacent area need to keep up with this, and we'll try to keep you posted on it. The next item that I have for announcement is that reminder about the Carnegie Neighborhood Lecture. They have this series both in the spring and in the fall every year. The lecture this Thursday will be from 6:30 to 7:30, and it will be a presentation by Dr. Peter Gao on his work on the new James Webb Space Telescope exploring unusual exoplanets. The second in that series is going to be on June 16th, and they're hoping to have that one in person as well as probably video accessibility as well. So any other announcements from commissioners? Connie?
I just wanted to announce that the Chevy Chase playground, the playground right by the community center, the surface, the turf has been, all the sort of holes and so forth have been replaced. Finally, this is after more than a year of asking. They finally got the materials and they got the right weather to be able to do that replacement. So that's really good news. The other piece of news is there was a TSI for speed hump speed tables on Broad Branch Road between like Military and Morrison. Now, there were two residents who didn't want that. And so DDOT went ahead and did a study, and the study showed that there was no pattern of speeding, and therefore they're not going to put the vertical deflectors. So instead, they will do other traffic calming measures to help. So one thing would be to put in pavement markings and parking boxes along the two sides. No center line though, because it's not wide enough, but on the two sides in order to visually narrow the road for vehicles that come from Military Road going north on Broad Branch. Also, whenever DDOT does any kind of work like this, they will take the opportunity to put in standards that have not been in place, and standards such as no parking within 25 feet of a stop sign. This is really important. I mean, I know on Connecticut Avenue where I make turns, I can't see. So it provides drivers to have a sight line, and it's especially important to all the pedestrians, parents and everyone who are walking. So that will start. I think that will be done in the summer, if not slightly earlier, but that's what we should expect. And it is a good result because of this communication between DDOT and us. And it's Sahar Nabez, who was wonderful, really communicative, really great style, and really helped us out. And I had meetings with just my SMD in that area, as well as email exchanges. So wanted to report that out.
Good. Okay, thank you. Peter.
Yeah, earlier this year, after a series of incidents at some of the apartment buildings in my district, Commissioner Gore and I started to organize meetings with apartment managers, and we're trying to get people from the housing authority to talk about vetting requirements under the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I want to stipulate that I have no knowledge about whether either of the two awful incidents that have occurred along or further down the avenue from us in last week have anything to do with voucher, but I think it's a good time to renew that effort. We started talking to some of Council Member Che's staff, but we've been consumed by the Murray issue and now the SAP, but we will intend to get back to that because it's an important issue. I don't know if Lisa has other things she wants to say about that, but we will keep you posted.
Connie or Chaz?
Yeah, I have a question for Connie, actually. Connie, if there no study had been done about the speed bumps and the speed patterns, why were the bumps installed in the first place?
It's not that they were going to be installed. It's that when you put in the request, the person who put in that request queried 18 of his neighbors, and
Okay.
most of them came. If they all came in positive, they probably would have just done it. But because two objected, they took the conservative approach, which was to to abide by those wishes and try to see if there's another way. So I really like minimal intervention, starting that first.
Mhm.
And if this doesn't slow traffic down, then we can go one step further. But they've already changed all of the speed limit signs that were erroneously posted that said 25 miles per hour. It was just a contractor mistake. And now it's 20 miles per hour. And then they'll have the, no parking at the curb, and then they'll put the
No.
pavement markings. And the other thing I wanted to add was I really asked them for high visibility crosswalk at Morrison and Broad Branch Road. That was that incident where the bus turned 2 years ago and then hit two children. So that area, that intersection is pretty bad. And so I asked them to really focus on that. So they will do something there. And that is the reason that
Thank you.
there's no deflectors. Yeah. The other thing I forgot to add was last Thursday, we had our 9th information exchange meeting with Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing and Determined by Design. The video recording is up. The Q&A and chat is up, and I really encourage people to watch it. It was a really well received session, I think. Thank you.
Michael?
Just a question, Connie, on Broad Branch in the traffic calming measures, what if anything is going to be done at the intersection at Northampton and Broad Branch where the kids cross over to the market?
It didn't go that far up.
Okay.
So it didn't cover it. The resident was only focused on Military to Morrison. That was it. So
Well,
I don't know. It's a
Okay,
good question.
because I have a request in from various neighbors in that stretch to look at traffic calming measures at that intersection because of the volume of kids crossing over to the market and back to the school.
Yeah, and I think what's important to also announce is that Michael and I restarted our going to the farmers market on Saturdays. We were there from like 9:30 to 12:30, and that was good because people can come and complain, and then we can. Michael's really great at like right away filing the 311 request, so we could help you do that. And we also talk to people about the small area plan. So if anyone wants to meet us, we will be there, and we will also share with you who your commissioner is and to give you the contact information.
Okay, anything else? Any other commissioner announcements? I don't see Amir in our attendees. D. Smith is there, I see. If D has any.
Amir
put a note in he put a note in that he's unable to come today.
Okay. All right.
Michael, do you want to read what he said? He said his main announcement is going to be the street cleaning for streets that do not have regularly scheduled sweeps are able to be requested through 311. And if any residents have requests, send them over to me to escalate. So maybe somebody ought to put his email in the chat. We're full service ANC. We do the announcements for the community too.
Are there any other community announcements? Anyone who has a community announcement, please raise your hand. That would be helpful so we can notice you. Okay, I don't see anyone raising a hand. Okay, I just got a little note from Connie that we're not going to be dealing with the Blue 44.
Well, we could.
Sure.
I mean, it's just a simple, I guess, alcohol beverage regulation, like permit for them, like a license, I guess, for them to continue to sell alcoholic beverages. Do I need to? I mean, I could read it off what it is.
Well, the only
It's pretty
question,
regular. Yeah.
there are two questions that come up with an ABRA renewal like this.
Yeah.
The first is, has anything changed? Is the license seeking any additional
Yeah.
hours or service or anything else?
Mm-hmm.
And
It does not. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
if it's going to be exactly the same, then that makes it easier for us to make a judgment about it. The second thing was if there are any complaints by anyone about the establishment.
So I think the hearing is not until June 13th. We can certainly push it off till after the small area plan,
Okay.
may as well, because we have another one coming up in Peter's district too. So we could
more.
just put two more. So we could just put all three together because none of these
Okay.
are urgent right now. And then I can make a phone call and I can find out all that information. So thank you, Randy.
Okay. I think they'll all be pretty straightforward because as I understand it, none of them are asking for any difference in the
Yes.
or service or anything else. So, okay, we'll go right then to the major portion of our meeting tonight, and that is a discussion of the draft small area plan. The plan was initially distributed by the Office of Planning. I believe it was on March 13th.
14th.
March 14th. And there's a long history, or not a long history, but there's a history of the comment period has been extended from 30 days to 60 days now, so that the comments are now due on May 13th. And so the commission is, or all the public, under the requirement that we put in our comments by May 13th. That's a short time period, and we're going to have to work hard to get a resolution done before then. But tonight's meeting is really to set that up, to go through some of the aspects of the small area plan, the draft, and discuss among ourselves really how we want to approach this and what we want to include in a resolution. And the hope would be that we can agree among ourselves on an approach that we will use, and then that we can begin that drafting process very quickly and have a draft that could be circulated not only among the commissioners, but to the public by a week from today. That's the hope. So that we'll have a full week before our next meeting on May 9th, when we can consider the draft resolution and vote on it, so that we can get our comments in by May 13th, the close of the comment period. We're not going to take any votes on anything tonight. That's the bottom line. We're going to discuss this among ourselves to see where there are areas of agreement and where there may be areas of disagreement, and to see if we can work those out. We won't get into the real details tonight. We're looking at broad concepts and how we're going to approach the resolution. There's going to be a lot to cover tonight, and so we want to use our time as effectively as we can. And so with the help of Peter and Chaz, we've come up with a tentative schedule or agenda for how we would approach this. And I'll just describe that generally. And some time limits are certainly flexible, and we'll decide as we go along whether that's sufficient time or we need more time. And I should emphasize as well that we've been discussing this sort of bilaterally, one-on-one or two-on-one or whatever, to see if there were areas where we could productively work together and see and reach an agreement. And so hopefully we're going to be able to do that. And Peter's been doing the lion's share of the drafting thus far. And so Peter's going to be introducing each of these sections as we get to them. He and Connie are the lead people on from our commission on the small area plan. And so others have been helping on it as well, but they have been taking the lead. The first thing we wanted to discuss is to get an overall picture of the issues. And Peter's going to introduce that and specifically on the areas where we might be able to focus our attention. And we'll spend probably about 15 minutes on that. And then there are 5 larger issues that we've identified that we're going to spend a little bit more time on, about 10 minutes per issue. The first is affordable housing. The second is height, the height of the whatever new development might occur. The neighborhood serving retail that we want to continue to promote and encourage. The infrastructure that would be supporting the new development, which is one area that's been sort of neglected in the draft small area plan. And finally, design and design guidelines that are mentioned in the small area plan. And we'll spend about 10 minutes on each one of those, trying to get an idea of where the commissioners stand and where we're likely to have some agreement. We'll next talk about an overall strategy for how we would interact with the future development as it comes up. Whether that development is within the specified guidelines of the small area plan, in which case the review could be fairly straightforward, or if there were more deviations, then we would have much more community involvement. And we'll spend about half an hour on that. Then we'll talk about the next steps, how we can get a draft resolution by May 2nd, and what the assignments are to commissioners to draft that, and how we're going to distribute it to the public. And finally, we'll have a period for audience comments and suggestions at the end. And certainly you can put your comments in the chat, or if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. I want to emphasize too that this is a process where it would be best if people submitted written comments to us. We've gotten a lot already. Several people have written very thoughtful comments on the draft small area plan. And there's also tomorrow's public hearing that the Office of Planning begins at 2 o'clock at the Chevy Chase Presbyterian Church and goes until 7. And that will be an opportunity for anyone to come and speak directly to OP. And we're going to be monitoring that as well. So we're going to be covering it. It will be an opportunity for everyone to hear comments directly on the draft plan. And so I know OP is as well soliciting written comments too. So any written comments that you give to the Office of Planning would be very helpful if you gave them to us as well. So that's the way we're going to proceed tonight. Is that okay for all the commissioners? Does that sound like a reasonable plan? Okay. So Peter, you want to begin then with the overall introduction?
Yeah.
And I'll try to keep us on something of a tight schedule here so we can try to get this done at a reasonable hour.
Okay. So I want to be sure that people attending this meeting understand I have been working on trying to figure out where our areas of agreement and disagreement are, and talking with commissioners about a framework for how to approach this. And I've written a document that I hope can be put in the chat, the link to which can be put in the chat, so that people can see the broad outlines and follow it. What I want to do at the outset here is just set up the kind of logic that brought me to this way of approaching the way I'm trying to convince the commission to approach it. The commission asked for this small area plan more than 2 years ago, and the community has been involved in a planning process for more than a year. And clearly there have been disagreements among the commissioners and disagreements among the community, among our residents about the process. And I want to be clear, I'm going to have disagreements, a lot of disagreements about the plan before us, but we do have now a draft plan in front of us. And it seems to me that it's our responsibility to decide what to do about it. A lot of people, including some commissioners, have said there's no need to do much of anything because after all, the plan is just an aspiration, a vision statement without much immediate consequence. I don't think that's quite right. It does have immediate consequence. It's going to be the Chevy Chase chapter in the comp plan, essentially no matter what we do. And it will be the last step, or almost the last step, and I want you to remember that, before the council, OP, and the zoning commission implement that plan in this community. A lot of people say there is nothing we can do because that's not how planning works, or because the city is already engaged in this strange process of upplumbing and already changed the density on Connecticut Avenue. So we've got no bargaining power anymore. And I don't think that's true either. One way to address the question of how planning works is to put our draft plan up against the yardstick of other small area plans in Washington and other small area plans in adjacent jurisdictions. When you do, you discover that there can be plans that are much more consistent, have much more clear community asks, and are much stronger. And let me just give you one example, comparing our small area plan to the small area plan from Alexandria that covers just a little more terrain than ours does. There are many differences in the terrain, but it covers about the same terrain as ours does. The community in this case said, we're going to build a lot. We need more public transportation. Indeed, we need a metro stop. And the metro stop is just about finished construction at something like $300 million. In our plan, the word shall, as in a developer shall do X, Y, or Z, or shall not do A, B, and C, does not appear once. In Alexandria's Oakville Triangle plan, which I've just been talking about, it appears 516 times. As for the matter of bargaining power, I have a lot of sympathy for people who feel they haven't been heard. But I think it's wrong to conclude that we can't be heard. And that's because it turns out that we are not at the last step. We're at the next to last step. Before a developer can come in and start building under new rules, there needs to be a zoning change. And the framework that I've been offering to my fellow commissioners builds around getting us involved in that last step, structuring the zoning change. What I propose is that the ANC should embrace OP's suggestion, which appears to my understanding appeared for the first time on the in the last paragraph of the last page of the draft plan, that perhaps we create a new zoning area or zone encompassing our Upper Connecticut Avenue commercial core from the Chevy Chase Circle to Livingston. But I want to put a spin on the ball. I think we should ask and expect that as part of our action on this draft plan, the language designating that new zone and the conditions that development must meet in that zone be drafted not by OP alone, but by a committee that includes members of the ANC and residents of this community, and that the drafting occur before anything goes to the zoning commission and or any other city body. Now, to make this approach work, we're going to need to make a series of decisions. And what I hope happens tonight is that we get a sense of where each of us is on this subject, so that I can work with some of my colleagues to draft language over the next week that we can refine in conversations between us and at our next meeting and approve. There's a first and most basic decision, and this is the one I think we need to take up right off. And that is, are we working towards some kind of approval of the SAP, or in one way or another towards rejection? In the language that some of us have been using with each other to talk about this, does our resolution say, yes, to the plan if X, Y, and Z are changed or X, Y, and Z occur, or no, but if OP does X, Y, and Z, then we'll reconsider. We need to debate this right at the top. And I'll just start by saying I'm in favor of yes, if. It keeps us in the game. It's most likely to get us to the zoning drafting table. It gives us a way to make adjustments and improvements in the small area, in the draft small area plan that we simply have no other way and no time to make. And I think that's particularly important if this is going to go into the comp plan, no matter what we do. It counts, the words in the plan count, even if we don't like all of it. On the flip side, I think that if we say no, but, OP will say, too bad, and go right ahead with what they're doing. And I think that where that will hurt us most immediately is when we come to what's likely to be the first project in this community, which is the community center library. And we desperately want to be involved with that. I just point out that the small area plan is currently drafted on the column that says implementers fails to mention us. I wouldn't want to read too much in, but so anyways, I want to hear from other commissioners. I know there's a variety of views on the subject of whether it's a yes if or a no but resolution that we're working towards.
Commissioners?
Really?
If no one's got anything to say, I will. I agree with Peter. I think we were the ones who asked for the small area plan in the first place. And it's going to go forward. If we don't do anything, it's still going to go forward. Or if we oppose it, it's still going to go forward in some fashion. But I think Peter's right that we can have the most influence if we say, yes, we think this is appropriate for our neighborhood, but we think these conditions are essential, and make it the strong case. That's essentially what we did with the comp plan. We said, yes, we can agree to greater density, but we have to have a lot more input from the community and be able to control what's going to go forward in our neighborhood. And essentially, we're at the same position now. We're saying we still want to have that input and that control as we go forward. And I think we can make the small area plan, the draft small area plan, much better than it is. I agree with Peter about the specificity. It really needs more specificity. And we do need to be thinking about that next step, which is the zoning change at the zoning commission. And this is going to be very instrumental in whatever the zoning commission does. They have to act not inconsistently with the small area plan. And so it's very important, I think, that we get this right. And so I would agree with Peter. That's the tone, at least, of the resolution that I would suggest we pursue. John?
Yes, I'm sort of in favor of Peter and Randy's approach. I'm a little bit leery of putting it in the caveat yes but category. I think maybe this is very nuanced and maybe overly precise. But putting it in a context of, if you don't do this, we're going to pick up our marbles and go away, is not really a good approach. And if we propose 25 or 50, or just to pick a number, 76 items for consideration, and they say okay to 66, but they don't get to the last 10, do we go away? I think I would tilt more towards Randy's approach. I would say yes, we approve of the plan, but we pose, and to keep it in a positive tone, and we pose a certain number of what we consider to be enhancements to the plan. And those enhancements could be new things, or they could be improvements to what we consider to be deficiencies. But I think we should maintain a collaborative tone rather than take it or leave it tone.
Let me just, for the purpose of people, attendees, so they understand John's remark, in addition to vetting with my fellow commissioners a proposal for how we approach this, I've also provided a lengthy document with 76 question areas. And I will speak to the issue that John raises here, but I just so people know what he's talking about with the 76. Chaz.
Yeah, reacting to what John has said, I guess there's a lot of issues we all have with the draft as it is. Mainly its vagueness and things left out, and then probably some factual errors as well. And we have everybody's attention at the moment. And so I think we want to avoid saying these things would be nice if you have time and are inclined to do them. I think we need to be fairly firm in what we're asking for. Particularly if, as Peter will suggest, that we're asking for a process that's ongoing. The lesson I took from the event that Historic Chevy Chase did a couple Thursdays ago from Ellen McCarthy's statements was that we're going to be involved in planning and zoning issues always. And SAP is one step, but it's a big one. And so we need to, if we want to play a big role going down the road, we need to play a big role here. And I think there's plenty for us to do. And that's why I so much appreciate, Peter, your distilling some islands of attention for us to push forward with.
So Connie, can I just say that to this point, everybody has said version of yes. And so, I mean, I know Michael, for example, has a different view, and somebody might want to articulate that before we go on. But I mean, Connie, go ahead.
Okay, so what I wanted to say was I have looked at this draft as our chance to put in more precise language, to strengthen, to improve, to add things that we think are not there for post-SAP work activities. I came to my own conclusion, just like Peter did, in making sure that we're at the table. Because when I put together that Office of Attorney General information exchange, I talked to them quite a bit, and it was very clear that when an SAP goes forward, that whatever language you put in, the Office of Planning, a different unit than the one that Erican and Heba are in, they work on figuring out the zoning. So we don't want to, there's a range, and we want to make sure that we're in the right part of that range. And that means if we're at the table, that's better. So I really want us to be at the table. I don't think we're adversaries here. I like what John said. We're collaborative, right? I mean, this is for our community, and these are the people who can affect it. It does us no good service to be adversarial. It does us great service to be able to articulate priorities, what's really important to pursue. Okay, point out language that we think is wrong. They want to fix that. Point out areas where we really think may have missed the boat. We want to say that. We want to say that we heard this and it didn't really happen. It should happen in this particular way. So that's the way I want to approach it. I don't really want to say that yes, if, no, but, or that doesn't work for me. I think what works for me is we have this plan. We're at our greatest power right now, right? We have great weight. We're going to produce a draft resolution that takes into people's concerns and try to get that language right, insert things that are missing, and be very firm about the priorities of what really matters. I've already spoken, informally to Erican in person when he had his first office hours in March, right after the plan was released. And I told him, I said, there are some things in here and there's some things in there. He says, please, we're open to it. So we want to take that at face value, that they are open to change, and they are required to show the council and the public this draft and then the next final, what has changed in between. And they have listened to us every time we ask for something that really was, seems like what they should be doing. They've been able to accommodate us. And I think we want to do the same thing here, and we want to be at that table. I'll have more to say later.
So Lisa or Michael, I mean, everybody's spoken, but you two, we're just trying to get this on the table, what kind of resolution we're headed towards.
Well, I mean, I think everybody pretty much knows, hopefully, my opinion. I haven't really chimed in a lot on the email, but you know, historically, what my position is on these things. I think we have to put in a resolution what we want. This is our opportunity. I agree, you know, with Connie. It's not about being adversarial. It is about advocating for our community and advocating for what we want and what we need. I don't think OP would see that as adversarial, and if they do, shame on them. And we're going to push forward anyway. So we want to put, you know, what we really need in this resolution. I mean, this is our opportunity, and Chaz is right. This is forefront and center right now. I'm interested to hear also Michael's. I talked with Michael briefly on his ideas in terms of a resolution. So I am interested to hear that as well. But there's a lot of things in here. You know, I'm concerned about how we're going to get it all in, because there's so much. I'm just kind of concerned about, you know, what our resolution is going to look like in the final state. So that's kind of where I am. I don't think we're going to hurt anybody's feelings here. That's not the intent. Our resolutions always look professional and our tone is always appropriate, but we do need to lay out what we want to see here.
Michael?
So I think it's a false proposition to say adversarial, non-adversarial. Yes means non-adversarial and no means adversarial. I reject that as a proposition. I think that saying to the Office of Planning, we've read your document, we have considerable concerns with it. For example, the ANC doesn't exist as part of any of the 3.1, 3.2. We're not there. We're missing in some of the 2.1s that in the document as set out, we've been marginalized. I think that we are in a much stronger position, working collegially with them to say, as we have, remember, across this process, if we didn't say no, but the period would have been truncated, the amount of opportunity for the community to participate in it would have been limited. We drove, not me, you, Peter, Randy, Connie, you guys drove OP to a better process. And I think by saying to them, you haven't yet gotten there. So thank you for all your hard work. We want to continue to work with you. But at this point, this document, even if it's a vision document, is inadequate. And of course, it is not a plan. There is nothing in here that tells us what it is that is expected of our community. For example, we don't know how many housing units we're expected to provide. And we don't know, for example, if we had a number, whether that number is attainable on Connecticut Avenue through Connecticut Avenue development, whether it's IC plus, whatever the rule is, we don't know. And if it's not attainable on Connecticut Avenue, where are those other numbers, where are those other units going to come from? And what is that going to mean when they have to look at reevaluation of the zoning for the single family residence part of our community? So I just think there are too many things in this that don't allow me to say yes and I think that we are more empowered as an ANC to say no, but we want to continue to work with you so that we can collectively, OP and us, get to a better place. So that's where my current thinking is.
Okay. Just to see if we can move this forward, would it be fair to say that we've sort of got 5-ish commissioners leaning towards some version of a yes structure and one saying no? Anything that we draft in the next few days is going to be, we're going to hash over, but would it be a useful thing to move to the next stage to say, the weight of your advice is drafted as a yes-ish resolution versus a no-ish resolution. And then we can revisit this when we got words in front of us.
Well, let
Seems-
me ask you this question, Peter. Why, as a threshold matter, does there even need to be a yes or a no statement up front? I mean, you have, it seems to me, let me just finish the thing. It seems to me that you have 7 commissioners who have said this document is inadequate, that it needs work, and we want to work with you. So why can't our resolution just say this document needs work? We want to continue to work with you, but not bless it with your proposed yes, which I think disempowers us.
Connie, before you answer, can I try an answer on this? I mean, I think the find here, one of the things you, Michael, and I have talked about is like, what's our bargaining power? You used an analogy to a Tom Brady get a football thing, and like the person who had it and Tom Brady wanted it actually gave it to Tom Brady and then asked for something in return. And of course, he'd given the football already. Well, I think what we found here is that there's another football for us, and that is the writing the zoning the zoning designation language for this special zoning district, which OP itself has proposed. We need to get to that. We need to get to that table, and the way we get to that table is we move forward with the SAP, which is going to move forward anyways. And as we'll talk about in the next stage of this conversation, there are things we need to get into that SAP before it goes into the comp plan. So even if you don't like yes, getting us to the place where we get the next football, so we got something to bargain with, needs to have a yes. We need to move the thing forward. Connie. Chaz?
I think I've said these before, Peter, but I think at the end, this will be a semantic distinction when we get the details laid out. I think we'll find more agreement than we might expect and how it gets framed. We want to submit those details to the OP, and we can, edit the forcefulness of the language as we want. But I think there's consensus around the general onward plan.
Connie?
Let John go first. I'll come in after.
Oh, I didn't see John. Where'd you go? John?
I think Chaz is right. It might be kind of nuanced, but in the memo I sent around to everybody today, I mentioned that process right now legally is that OP is seeking comments. They're not necessarily seeking approval or disapproval. They're seeking comments. They're seeking feedback, and we'll provide them with feedback. And that feedback can be very sharp and pointed and well defined, and with as much emphasis as we want to put into it, based on Lisa's position of being advocates. That's what I say. I don't think we're not going to not comment. Whether we comment in Michael's context or the rest of his context, we're going to be sending them a lot of stuff. And as Charles says, at the end of it, maybe we'll figure out what the tone or the slant of it should be. But I feel giving them some list of enhancements is not necessarily a weak position. We can be very advocacy oriented. So I just want to keep the collaborative tone going and respond to them in the context in which they are seeking responses, which are comments.
So I'm in violent agreement with John. That's exactly was my point, is that, I think we're here to provide comments to improve, strengthen, clarify, make sure that anything missing is in there. This is a draft plan, right? This is their draft, what they thought they heard. And whether or not they heard right or wrong, or if they've included, this is our job to be able to put things forward and make sure that things are not like confusing in any way. So I want us to work toward that. Now, the spreadsheet that we have of all the recommendations and all of us trying to look to see if there's where there's disagreements, we need to work through that, because then we know what's missing in those recommendations, what recommendations we don't agree with at all, we want out. I think we go step by step. this document actually, even though it's not that long, there's a lot of things in the fine print, so when Michael was saying the ANC is not even there, on page 28, even for recommendations 3 in the civic core and other things. I mean, they put our names in there. So there's things that we can just make very clear. If they've missed us, we got to put it in. If there's anything that we think is like confusing, we have to make sure that it isn't. And it's our job to do that, I think. And I think we can work together on that.
Okay.
I'm willing to work together on that, getting it right.
Michael, I mean, you're welcome to talk, but I mean, we have a sort of, I mean, I think what I heard from Chaz, I heard from John, I heard from Connie is, let's set the tone later on. Can we go on to this next stage, or do we need to pursue this longer?
Can I just add one thing? We were told that when it goes to the council, I think there's another chance for us to provide feedback. Is that right, Randy? That's what I heard. When the council gives the up or down on the resolution, we have a chance to weigh in. So this is not the only shot, but I think our job now is to make sure this plan is solid. And it's not really even a plan. It's truly supposed to be an aspirational document. That's what I heard. But I really want that next step for us to be involved in that next step. However we write it, I'd like that to be the case. And then we have another chance to weigh in again. Formally, that is.
But the where I'd like to go with this conversation to these high level areas, it grows out of what the next step in the process beyond us, the process, whether we do anything or not, is. And that is this. So I have spent the last several weeks talking to city officials and lawyers who this commission knows and who I've been willing to disclose to the various commissioners. I have agreed to talk to these people on background, and so I'm not going to give their names in public, but these are respected officials who have appeared before this commission and whose advice we have taken in the past. Here is what they tell me about the status of a small area plan in the comp plan and the comp plan in the zoning process. If it ain't in the small area plan as it becomes part of the comp plan, and as I understand the process, that is basically essentially an automatic process. I do not think there's another hearing at the council level, but I can clarify that. But once it's in the comp plan, it gives the authority to the zoning designation writers what they can consider and what they can't consider. So that if we don't get language, so that besides being a visioning document, besides being an aspiration, if there's not language in the small area plan as it goes into the comp plan about things that we really care about, and the clearer we can be about it, the better. But it can be high level. We don't have to figure out the fix and then stuff it in the small area plan. We just have to put enough in the plan that we give authority to the zoning designation drafters to treat that matter. The one attorney that you've all heard recently and respected said, if it ain't in there, fight over. So that the way I propose to treat the next step of this conversation is to identify what we think are the sort of top 5, or if you want it 6, or if you want it 4, or if you want it 9, all fine, but the sort of top areas, and discuss among ourselves what we would like, besides sitting at the table and being part of the drafting process, what we would like to see in a special zoning district that requires developers to treat these areas. I want to step aside for 1 minute to address what John said early on about the 76. The way I conceive of this, and I think this is the way we could get to a resolution by next Monday this time, a draft resolution, is that besides these broad areas, there's an immense amount of stuff in here. There are statistics, which I have some questions about, in any case aren't sourced. There are contradictions. For example, the small area plan says that parking is a perennial concern of residents, customers, and employees, and it advocates reducing surface parking. There's a lot of stuff in here. My proposal is to treat, we don't have time to go word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. So my proposal is that, and I'm happy to make the language more neutral, but that we go through, you take a list like mine, you add to it, you change the wording, but we use that as not asking for change, but just saying these are areas where we have concerns. And so when you see this resolution, this is stuff we think is going to need to be solved. It's going to need to be solved if OP answers us and addresses these issues, or at the drafting level. But we set those as just an appendix to the resolution, and we focus on these. So we don't get lost in the weeds. We focus on 3, 5, 7 high-level things. Anyways, that is the approach I'm suggesting, and I suggest that now. John, you want to speak now, or you want to hit the
Well,
first?
no, Peter, I'm glad you opened the discussion at this level, because I think that's very important to take everybody's temperature. But I think we should start moving on to more of the detailed stuff, and we can.
Yeah.
Once we know about these problem areas, we can come back to this discussion about presentability and advocacy and so forth.
Okay, so
I'm in favor of just kind of let's start digging into some of the topics.
Okay, so I, in the document that people attending should be able to get at, and in a document that I sent around to the commissioners, I said, here, so my top 5 are these, and affordable housing, height, neighborhood serving retail, infrastructure, and design. My proposal is that we take a few minutes on each of these, and I suggest that we put height off to the next stage of this conversation, because I have a particular proposal on that. But so let's talk about affordable housing. Let me just set the stage in this way. In the resolution that our predecessor ANC passed, our predecessors made very clear that they were skeptical about the tools, the standard tools that the district has used to date on affordable housing, IZ and IZ+. And they asked for innovative ways to use nonprofit developers, community land trusts, and the like as part of this plan. Although nonprofits and community land trusts are mentioned in passing in the plan, there is no clear proposal for it. And I suggest, and I don't yet have the language, but I would advocate that we ask for language changes on affordable housing that ask the drafters of the zoning designation to put in place certain, even perhaps procedural processes that invite in and provide nonprofit developers and community land trusts at least an initial advantage, a first dibs advantage. This way, the exact format of this, I don't know yet. One of the reasons I like the idea of being at the table for the drafting is that it provides us a forum for working some of this out. But if we can get it in the zoning district, then it's built into the process that for future development. I open it up to.
So
go ahead.
So Peter, one thing I would say is, like, these are your issues that you've brought up, which are embedded in some of the topic headings in the document. So my preference would be like equitable housing strategy and then -- affordable housing, so that we anchor it to the document so people understand what is it that we're talking about. Okay. And if we're going to go that way, which I'm recommending, if you look at page 32 in the paragraph, they do mention not-for-profit, they do say opportunities should be explored for public-private partnerships, including not-for-profit developers, to provide more affordable housing. But even though they say it in the paragraph, we've got to look at the recommendations themselves, 4.3, which does mention community land trusts and vouchers, but as a such as. So we should strengthen the language in the recommendation part So things are mentioned in paragraphs, but our job is not to raise these issues broadly, but to say in this section, here's what's mentioned, great, but we got to be like much clearer. So that's the way I would approach it. I think that what I heard from DemPed, okay, from the Deputy Mayor for Economic Planning and Development, is that they are going to open up after after the council votes on this resolution, their resolution for the SAP, they're going to start with going out to the community to really build out the civic core. And what they're going to ask for is community meetings about what ideas do we have? What do we want to see before they put out their RFP? So this is our first chance to say, these are the things we'd like to see in here. And I think that last information exchange session, bringing in Arlington, was to give them that idea that resident services, the kind that APA, Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, is providing, is something that I'm interested in, that I would like in here somehow. That's not a part of the recommendations yet. So those are the things I think we should be inserting. Like, it could still be like 4.2 or 4.3.1.2.3. We could just extend it out. So we're not adding anything new, but we're adding to something that's already there.
Okay, I'm happy to work within the framework, but for example, would you consider rewriting 4.3 to say that all developers are required to propose for all affordable housing to propose a resident services component, so on. I mean, developers shall do this as a condition of development. Again, this thing, apply and build on existing options for providing deeper affordability for rentals, such as vouchers and community land trust, doesn't have much bite to it. And so how do we get it so that it is a fixed part of the development process? Let's just go to Randy for a minute. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we go back to the things we've been saying for all these years about affordable housing. And we need to be more specific as we've been in our prior resolutions, to say, we want deeply affordable housing. We want families to be family units, not just 1 or 2 bedroom units. We want to have a more than just IZ or IZ plus provides. We want a lot more affordable housing than has been considered in the past. And we've been very specific about that in the past. And we need to reiterate that. And that should be, I think, that should be in the small area plan. I mean, especially if we consider this to be an aspirational document, we should say, these are our aspirations. This is what we would expect. And let's figure out a way to do it.
Yeah. Chaz?
I think John was in front of me.
John?
This whole affordable housing issue seems to be, I don't know what the expression is, the cart before the horse or whatever. We talk about IZ and IZ plus, and we talk about PUDs, and talk about all this stuff. And I wonder how, and I'm getting to one of Michael's earlier points about number of units. I think there's a huge component here, which is the infrastructure component. Before we look upon increased density, whether it's regular density or affordable density or whatever it is, we have to make sure that the infrastructure is here. So when Michael raises this question about how many units, I think that's a valid point. There's going to be X number, whether it's affordable units or regular units, there's going to be more kids here. I went over this with Erkin briefly, and Lafayette is at 103%, and it's not going to go down. And we can't bring people into our neighborhood if we can't serve them. So I just wonder, we have all these mechanisms, and they may be good mechanisms for, the IZ components, and also the affordability standards for who can move in, and what level of income is appropriate, and all of that. And I don't I'm not opposed to any of this stuff. I think it's about time we did something in this area. But I think we need to be a little somewhat specific. Otherwise, we're kind of, you know, hit our heads against a brick wall if we can't provide the services. One of the advantages of moving to this neighborhood is all the, you know, is schooling and so forth to give these kids a good shot. Well,
John, can I point out that one of the headings that we're coming to is infrastructure.
okay, but you know, so that's fine. We can address it at infrastructure. So Mike, I guess I'm sorry to take up so much time. But my question is, how do all of these IZs and housing trust and so forth, how do they impact the number of people who can live here?
Can I just say as a side before others talk, you know, one of the things that would have made this whole debate a lot easier is if the district had given us some sense of a range of what they thought the allotment would be for our 10-acre commercial corridor. We were not given that. We know that there's a big push by the mayor to produce more affordable housing, and a particularly big push in Rock Creek West, of which we are a part. And so that's a reality that we have to face, but it would have been much easier to do all this planning if we had a number or a range. Chaz?
I appreciate that the plan doesn't talk enough about the infrastructure, but I don't think we ought to pair infrastructure and the number of people conversations with whether they're poor kids or rich kids. And affordable housing is a separate topic. And it's an important one. It's long predates certainly my time on this ANC. And it's one that I know wearing my historic Chevy Chase hat, that group is worried about as well. So I think if we can get some specifics there and make sure that they're not limited to the civic core as well. We don't want to have a public housing island in the middle of pristine Chevy Chase. If we can increase the diversity along the whole avenue and indeed in the neighborhoods eventually. It's my 2 cents.
No, I just want to piggyback on what Randy and Chaz says. I know that, you know, infrastructure is an issue. The community has definitely brought up the school and the overcrowding issue. I don't know when we're going to get to that particular resolution, but you know, we have to continue to press forward on the affordable housing issue. That's a real critical immediate issue. And you know, I don't know if we can predict how many people are going to be added to the avenue at this point in time. So that's a big, you know, factor when you're talking about how do you predict future population growth and particularly overcrowding in amongst schools. I think the ANC has been doing quite a good, you know, amount of work on trying to address that overcrowding issue in Lafayette, you know, with coming up with creative solutions. But I don't think that, you know, we can look at that infrastructure and use it as an impediment not to move forward on this affordable housing discussion.
Okay. Michael?
So on affordable housing, I have sort of one bottom line in some sense. And that is that the housing be for families, be large enough that families of 3-bedroom of their apartments, and that they be for sale so that people can acquire equity and build wealth. So when you talk of 1 or 2-bedroom rental apartments as affordable housing, yeah, I suppose. But for me, if this is not a plan. Let's be clear. They call it the small area plan, but it's not a plan. Because there's no implementation strategy in it. It's an aspirational document. So to someone's point earlier, we should say we expect or we require rather than we encourage, because that's what our vision is. But however we come to it, Peter and the other commissioners, that's where I think we help the most if we define affordable housing as to be purchased for families, as sort of the most important part of our vision.
So my point. Randy, just before you go, so far what I've heard from people is that they want the resolution to reprise the very issues we've raised about where we want to hit the mark on amount of affordable housing, what affordability means, what unit sizes are. What I haven't heard, and I'm interested in this, is that the other thing that we've said repeatedly, this commission, our predecessors have said, they said in the resolution asking for this small area plan, is that we want other ways to get there. Now, do we or do we not want to try to put in language that asks that as part of the zoning procedure, there be some sort of favoring of nonprofits or community land trusts or other than profit, for-profit routes to affordable housing, or do we not want to do that? I mean, I just want to know where we come out on that.
I think we want to try to, I think our language should be such that we want to get as much affordability in this area as possible. And I would not, this is just me, and I have a strong opinion on these issues, but I don't know if I would say nonprofit versus for-profit.
What?
The sense of what produces the best chance of affordability. And land use definitely comes into play with that. So we could say like public land, or, we know it's going to be cheaper to build on public land. We know community land trust is a good model that offers equity. I would maybe suggest us go that route and maybe frame it that way. The other thing I want to just kind of touch on is that unit size issue. I think we have to, frame that language as well, to where we advocate for a variety of sizes, because we definitely have family units that are needed, but we also have a lot of young professionals. We have a lot of teachers. We have a lot of, the police officers out there that are trying to get, their first affordable apartment or their first affordable home. So I think we need to kind of, keep in mind just that entire universe. We're definitely short on family size units here, but we want to keep that as open as possible, as well as those affordability levels. So I would just add that too in there. But I don't really want to frame it and get into a nonprofit versus for-profit. I want us to find the cheapest way to do it. There's other ways to do that that we haven't discussed tonight. I'll throw my ideas in there, but I think we just need to keep it as specific as we can, but not limit ourselves so much in that sense.
Randy?
Yeah, I just want to address two issues that have been raised. The first is with regard to the number of units that can be built in the area. Ron Eichner put something in the chat about what Ward 3 Vision had come up with, in 228 total units. That's total units. And I don't think we should get hung up on that, because it's impossible right now to say what can be developed there, because there's no developers and nobody has come in and made a proposal. So we don't know. And we don't know how many units can be built at the community center and library and still get what we want from the community center and library. So it's a complete unknowable at this point. And the fact that the mayor set some goal, that's sort of irrelevant for our purposes. What we should be interested in, as Lisa just said, is we should be getting as much affordable housing as we can, consistent with meeting all of our other objectives. And we should just worry about that. The second thing is with regard to schooling on infrastructure. I agree we need to focus on infrastructure, no question about that. But what's driving the increase in Lafayette Elementary School enrollment now is not and will not be new units on Connecticut Avenue. It's older couples like Samantha and me who are selling their homes to young families who are very interested in going to Lafayette. And so it's the churn of the housing and getting more young families who are moving in. That's what's driving the increase in Lafayette Elementary School enrollment. And this, whatever happens on the avenue is going to be a drop in the bucket compared to that.
Okay.
Can I just add my 2 cents here?
Yeah, sure.
I have an idea for community land trust that is separate than what we've been speaking about, that I've kind of raised over and over, but that's kind of something I want to just put in there. But I agree with Lisa and I agree with Randy. I don't think we should be locking the deal to make it happen by saying it's got to be this or that. I think they can negotiate. I mean, there's plenty of affordable housing development where there's the for-profit and the nonprofit together, doing it together, right? Or maybe a different combination, community land trust with a nonprofit. I mean, it's not our job to do that. Our job is, though, when a project comes forward, we want to see that if you want more housing and you're specifying it, then it's going to be greater height or wider or something, right? It may not fit the space. So we can't have that. But I think we want to maximize it as much as possible. And I think the reason I brought in APA last Thursday, the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, was only to say that when they built their 160 unit building in Arlington at the American Legion place, 20% of it, 60% of it was 2 to 3 family units, which was striking to me. I was like, wow, that's a lot. But that's their focus, is to do the mix, as Lisa was saying. You have to have the mix, because I think what we've always wanted was people who work here shouldn't be traveling, an hour and a half to get to work in the district. They should be living in the district. They should be able to live in the district. And when we had the apartment dwellers information exchange session, it was very clear they can't afford to buy. That to me is wrong. I think we have to make a real effort to have housing options, choice, and for other families, like Randy was speaking about, maybe selling it to your family. But there are people who are moving back in to take care of their parents, but they want to be in the main house. And this is separate from SAP. This is like inside our residence. So I'm saying the calculations they're making is like they want their parents to live maybe in the garage because they don't need such a big space. So there's a lot of different combinations. Our job really, though, is to say to OP, think of all things that you can do. So when Lisa brought in the community land trust people, Douglas Community Land Trust, I was really excited about, in their portfolio, they had 3 single family homes. And I asked, do you purchase single family homes? Because we have vacant and blighted properties just sitting there not being used. I want the district to seriously consider putting money in so that they can buy, so that low income families or lower income families could be interspersed throughout a community and not in one spot. Those are some ideas, but that's not a part of the small area plan, which is only a certain boundary. So for that, I think we should focus on whatever deal makes sense, but we want to add some of these names in there to say, please look at all combinations.
Do we think we've got, I've got some direction from this.
Yeah, I think we should move on to the next.
As I suggest, I'm going to suggest that we skip over height and we take it up kind of in the next part of this discussion after we get through these other ones. Let's just talk for a moment about neighborhood serving retail. And again, if you look at the resolution of our predecessor ANC, asking for a small area plan, it was very specific. I can get you the language. I've got so much paper at this stage, I'm not sure I could. That it wanted to find incentives for helping our neighborhood serving retail businesses. Now, look, in this draft, there are some elements that address this. One of the elements that many of the people I have talked to over the last couple of weeks point out is this small storefront. It asks, the plan and the design guidelines talk about the design for the east side of Connecticut as trying to, in many ways, mimic what's on the west in terms of the size of the retail space, and that clearly would build in an advantage to smaller versus, Walmart, Target, big retail, and that's important. In addition, the plan does mention targeted technical assistance. What troubles me here is that, and it mentions a good deal about the Main Street organization. What troubles me here is the following. if you look at the retail chapter, it doesn't seem to recognize what I think we have said we see as a problem, and many of our residents have seen as a problem. It says this is only a 2% vacancy rate. John Stover did a really massive market analysis in June of last year of our Chevy Chase Main Street. He found an overall vacancy rate of 4%, but he also found a storefront vacancy rate of 18%. So it seems to me there's a bigger problem than the problem this small area plan as now drafted recognizes. The other thing is that as we talk about new building, we're talking about dislocating businesses. And look, I do not have any easy solutions here, but I wonder whether we want to put language in that talks about trying to find stronger medicine to help existing businesses. Look, I'm shooting from the hip here, but here's an example. This city has a very, very innovative TOVA law, the tenant right to purchase law. Could we ask that the council and the zoning commission consider extending that to existing retail businesses that will be displaced by innovation, at least procedurally, so that they would have a right of first refusal about coming back? Should we ask that the zoning, that development in this area, the developers include in their proposal some sort of plan for how one might house existing businesses during the construction phase? I just offer these as examples. The problems we're dealing with, I think the problems that this community has identified are bigger than the problems that are addressed by the proposals here. I open up the floor to people. Whoa.
So again, again, I would want us to anchor it to what's in the document. So it would be thriving retail corridor. You know, like it would be either that section or inclusive built environment, which has some language too. So let's anchor it, you know, to that. And
well, as I say, I have an endlessly long sheet that goes through all of these things, but I mean, we certainly am willing to see the solutions in here. I mean, it's not that I don't want to activate our Main Street, but that when you go down here and try to find some teeth, there are no shells. There's the only assistance to businesses is this targeted technical assistance. In the text, it mentions Chevy Chase, for example, on page 36, it mentions Chevy Chase Main Street. I just point out two things about Chevy Chase Main Street. I think the largest grant they've ever given is $4,000. And they no longer have a program manager because OP was higher. So, you know, it's a program right at the moment in trouble. So do we want to put more in, or is this adequate? Chaz?
One of the concerns I guess I have is that this is a planning document. The Office of Planning didn't talk about schools, and they didn't talk about other things that are DOT's responsibility. In some respects, this business promotion, they're going to say, is not within their remit as well. You know, this concern I have is I don't know the current diversity of ownership or of the stores along the avenue, but you know, that's diversity that may be missing as well. And the city certainly has programs. So can't we get some of that directed at, you know, opening up the business population as well as the resident population?
But we have that.
But how that fits into a zoning rule escapes me, I confess.
But you know, Chaz on page 37 under recommendations, they do include other agencies, you know, to help. I mean, on recommendation 5.2,
they certainly mention them, but I'm not at all clear to me how that gets translated into a MU 3, 4, or 17.
Yeah, Connie, to this point, I mean, there are many things mentioned here. The question is, do we want the language to be more prescriptive? And Chaz, to your point, I mean, one of the things about this document is it focuses exclusively on the retail district. And the notion that it would say, this is a plan for a retail district in which we think that there's this very low vacancy rate and, you know, some activation and technical assistance are, it's all right. I mean, I will, when we get to infrastructure, I will argue whatever OP thinks its remit is, we have the right, and I think we have the obligation to represent this community as having broader interests that maybe go beyond their current, you know, their current portfolio, legal portfolio. But here, I mean, the argument for that it should be, you know, that this should be a focus, neighborhoods serving retail, is made for no other reason than the whole plan focuses on just a retail district, right? So, Michael.
Well, so were I the commissioner who represented the west side of Connecticut Avenue, and thankfully I'm not, I would be very concerned about section 5 of this thing, because it is, again, to my broken record, this is not a plan. There's nothing in this that tells you how anything is going to be accomplished. It just says this is what we endeavor to do. It's a vision document. And if it's a vision document, I think it has to be more prescriptive. And I'm worried about the small business owners on the west side of Connecticut Avenue, and how if large development is allowed and buildings are raised, what happens to their businesses when during that transition period, and what happens to the rent? It's expensive now. What happens then? And so one of the questions, Peter, that you and I have talked about, which I remain somewhat conflicted about, but lean more toward, is I want to know more about whether or not the designation of the west side of Connecticut Avenue as a historic district will be protective of these, more protective of these small businesses than less. And if it would be more protective of these small businesses, and if it gives us more power to control the type of design and structures that are of the structures that are to be built, I would favor that. And so I would expect that in our resolution, we need to talk about, we need an answer. I need more of an answer to that question, because I'm concerned that somehow all of a sudden we have this form-based code, which somehow is creeped into the vernacular when there's no real statistical data on how it works. And I'm worried about anything that divests the ANC of its authority to weigh in and have its opinion be given great weight. And I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I am very worried for the small business owners, and I'm concerned about whether or not we are doing enough to protect them. And I'm curious to know more about whether or not the historic designation, which I think it would, be protective of them and empowering of us.
Andy?
Yeah, I don't think it's either or. It's certainly, we could have a historic designation for parts, at least the west side of Connecticut. And I think that could operate consistently with the small area plan and with form-based codes. What I'm more concerned about, actually, I think there's less likelihood of development on the west side. I think the more likely development is going to be on the east side, because that's where the big bucks are going to be. That's where the big parcels are and where a lot more development can occur. It's the way it's split up on the west side. It's probably not going to have a whole lot more development. In fact, they could have been developing it now and they haven't. So I think there's more likelihood that it's not going to get developed. But I think we should really focus on the small area plan. And then if there's an interest in having a historic designation for the west side of the avenue, I think that's great. We'll pursue that too.
Let me just say that I agree with Randy that it's not either either or. It does concern me that that just because those buildings have been there a long time doesn't mean, I mean, we've seen pictures in illustrative pictures that OP has produced of what to my eyes was a luxury cruise ship smashing in and over the top of the PNC building. I'm not sure that was a great picture to offer, but I do think that whatever we do, we need to include at minimum some help for, I think that the problems on the avenue are greater than this set chapter indicates. And I think that just in terms of operating of a retail district, we need to help. And then I do think that we need to have some protections during levels of development and during construction phase. Michael, one other thing, which is that one way you might think about form-based codes is a historic district without the history. I mean, I'm going to propose at the very end of this process that our resolution include a provision that says nothing in what we say should be interpreted as precluding a historic district, either for the west side or more broadly. But much of what we're talking about, I mean, it seems to me that a historic district, and let me stipulate, I don't yet know enough about a historic district, but it doesn't seem either or, so I don't need to make that decision right now. And a first impression is that it's a strange instrument to use for the concern about overdevelopment and improper development. So, Connie.
No, I was just going to say that.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure. Yeah.
Which is,
Michael.
Peter, one of the feedback types of comments that I've received a lot of is talking about the character of the community. And so when I raise historic districts and listen to what Suzanne from Habitat for Humanity said and others said,
Susan Slater.
Yeah, that it seems that there may be an advantage there, both in design and giving the ANC some stronger voice. Now, I know some people in the chat say otherwise. I don't know enough to know, but all I'm saying is what troubles me about the resolution, the small area visioning document, is it doesn't talk with any specificity about that.
Well,
Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was going to say that we're not now discussing the urban design guidelines, which we should. And those guidelines are very helpful. I mean, I think that we need to make sure that that's strengthened, because it talks about any kind of building that might come up on the east side or the west side and what it is that we'd like to see, but also make sure that all the other values that we care about, like equity and affordable housing and so forth, are also, part of that discussion. And form-based codes and these other kind of, I guess, approaches or tactics can be used. I think there are other districts in DC that have used it as like an overlay, a zoning overlay, and for us to make use of that. But let's not talk about that right now. I think I want to go back to, Peter, you started talking about the thriving retail, corridor, right? And there's been a lot of back and forth about whether or not, this is a vision document and so forth, and where's the precise language. Well, there's strategies here, recommendations on strategy. If we don't feel like it's enough, we need to think about how to make it stronger. I think that's important. All these words are, it's like they have the paragraphs, they're talking about what they see, and then they have the recommendations. If we're arguing about what they see isn't reality, it's actually worse, then those recommendations need to be strengthened.
And that's what I've suggested. And I think I've heard that there's that concern. I mean, I haven't heard any, I guess in this situation, we'll try to get to some language and see how it floats with you guys. But I mean, I mean, I think I've been quite clear in this area. I just don't think the analysis of the problem is adequate. And I don't think the solutions on page 37 are adequate therefore. And so, I mean, I think, I have not heard from you, other than a historic district, other tools you might want to ask be examined or included as part of the drafting of the zoning district. That
Well,
any
you know,
development in any, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, there are a lot of people who say if number one is COVID, the last 2 years, it's been really troublesome. It's difficult to get people out. People are ordering, deliveries and so forth. It's hard to get people to sit inside a restaurant. Now the weather is better. They need they need foot traffic. And I think in this document, they talk about beautification. They talk about like commemorative plaques for history to make it more interesting, to add visuals that will make it more enticing for people to come out. I think these are all ways. They're indirect. They're not direct. Direct would be, do you have subsidies, money, increasing density, more residents in that area? You'll have more foot traffic, right? I mean, these are all ways in which to make it happen. I think we have to examine each of these recommendations and make sure that, is this enough? How can we do it? Do they add the right implementers? Should we even say, look, you got a study that came out last year that showed 4% vacancy rate. You're saying to us that it's less than that. We would like you to discuss, to study, to analyze, to tell us, and then to have a plan after. That could be in this plan, right? This is what we want to see, a thriving retail corridor, and the strategy is not enough. We need more. So that means we need more attention.
You need an economic analysis.
Subsidy. Correct.
Well,
right.
the thing
We
is
could
that,
ask for that.
Yeah,
That's what we could ask for. We could ask. We could say to Mary Che, who's still our council member, to say, could you help press for that? Where can we get the money for that? We could ask for these things, and I think it would be helpful.
can I just say
Let's
that, what?
I'm just suggesting we should move on to the next topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just say one thing. I think the strategy that I'm trying to convince my fellow commissioners of is that we try to find things that we think need to be improved here, but that we try to find improvements where we are at the table. I mean, asking Mary Che for wondering about whether COVID, will, as it wanes, will let the district improve. I mean, on that basis, we always should wait. And, ultimately we'll know how the world turns out and we can make a plan on that basis. We can't do that. We always have to decide under uncertainty. Asking for separate studies, maybe we get them, maybe we don't, but we're not at the table. And so one of the things I'm trying to get us to focus on is, what can we ask for that we can get changed here to give, in essence, authorizing language for us when we sit at the drafting table for the zoning thing, that every developer should be required to provide a plan that if there's any displacement of retail, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want you to think along those lines, okay?
I think we can move on. Agree.
Okay,
I think we're in agreement.
Okay. On infrastructure, we've talked some about schools. I think the biggest problem I have here is it starts with parking, okay? The plan on page 39 says that parking is a perennial complaint of residents, customers, and employees of establishments along the avenue. And on page 25, proposes reducing surface parking. I think that my own sense, I just offer this as the sort of thing we talk about. I think we have to bite the bullet. We're talking about 10 acres. We want to put some new things here. We're going to have to advocate for underground parking. I don't know who pays for it. I don't know, but we can't dance around it. I find the safe and sustainable mobility chapter to be disturbing, because we're an older population and we need cars, at least a lot of us do. I am perfectly capable of walking to Connecticut Avenue. I am not planning on carrying large amounts of groceries home from the Safeway. So I think that we did that. There's an issue that just hasn't been addressed. But I think the same thing goes for traffic. And anyways, I'm happy to take your opinions.
So I
on
was
it.
just going to mention that, when we had our housing work group, this is a part of the racism task force back in 2020, when we looked at the civic core, the co-development of the library and the community center, and to add in mixed income housing, affordable housing, we talked about underground parking. And we pushed for that. That was key. That was very important. But we also have heard from seniors in that neighborhood and in several different public meetings that they really value surface parking. So, DDOT is going through their reversible lane study right now. They are going to look through 6 or 7 parking task forces along Connecticut Avenue. Both Commissioner Cadwell and I are on that community advisory committee. I've asked Ed Stoloff, who's the program director of that whole study, if we're going to reactivate the former Commissioner Malletz's parking task force to be a part of this conversation for this summer. It's important. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've asked for sensors to be placed on every parking meter so that if you do use a smartphone, you could find out what parking is available, at least for along the any place that has like metered parking. I would love to see something that's similar to a public kind of underground parking that's not expensive so that our retail stores can benefit and so that seniors and others who don't like to walk because they're trying to carry things back or who don't bike can actually use their cars. So I think we can press for that, and we have done it in various ways, but we have to certainly do it here.
Maybe a point addressed to both Connie and Chaz, since you're on the reversible lane study. In recommendations on page 41, you'll see that this plan is now drafted, recommends extending the protected bike lanes up to the circle. I think it says in here a loss of 80 parking places, and studying bike lanes over to Friendship Heights, presumably all along Military and or McKinley, and presumably with additional loss of on-street parking. Again, I think this is an issue where somewhere along the way we're going to have to bite the bullet. If you're going to lose some surface parking and you're going to lose on-street parking, and whether the OP's sustainability goals are offended or not, we have an older population. We got to square these things.
Right. I did send an email to Ed saying, because they are going to examine, the reversible lane study stopped at Legation and went further south because that's when the reversible lane began. And now they're going to study from Legation to the circle. So I asked, when are they going to study it? When are they going to start studying it? When are they going to end it? What happens in between? And do they understand that some storefronts don't have loading and unloading in the alleyway? How is this all going to work? So they're going to do the study and we're going to have to weigh in. And it doesn't have to be extended if it's truly you lose 80 and you can't find it anywhere else. I mean, we already have workers like at Salon Familia who are there and they can't park. Like they don't have like a parking permit that allows them to park when they work at a commercial enterprise. These are things I want to add because this is not right. If we want to have a thriving retail sector and people are driving because they live in Virginia and they're working here in our neighborhood, they need to have a place where they can park. So how do we find it? There are apartment buildings where parking garages are not all full. So there's got to be some way to coordinate empty spaces and the ability to either charge people for parking or to find spaces for them to be able to park when they work here from 9 to 5 or whatever the time is. And also for seniors to have enough surface parking so that they're not going underground and finding it difficult. So it's hard. These are all difficult things, but we have to focus on it and pay attention.
Lisa.
The one thing I want to add about that is I don't think anyone has mentioned transportation in the sense of our bus transportation. The idea is not to grow our parking. That's not the idea. Environmentally, it's not the idea. And just, long-term city planning, that's not going to be the idea. We have to include, hopefully in this, the push for better transit access and better transit routes, specifically up here in our area where we've been fighting for the E6 and, some of our other bus routes that we haven't gotten back. So, I mean, I know that the parking is going to be an issue. I just don't want us to lose sight of the overall transportation issue and pushing and advocating for, better transit in general.
Well,
'Cause, I would rather prefer, folks, taking a bus and, easing some of the congestion that we have overall.
Well, okay, I mean, again, I try to introduce this notion of, are there proposals that you would want to see included here to give authorizing language to zoning designation drafters to put it as a requirement of development in there? If you don't like parking, for example, you also got to square protected bike lanes with where the buses are going to go.
I'm sorry. If 6.3 says develop a coordinated parking plan that takes advantage of the existing parking lots, right, in the CCAP study area for better utilization throughout the day and night, week and year. I think we got to get DDOT involved here. I mean, the implementer is property owners, Chevy Chase Main Street and ANC. This is probably not the right group of people. So that's where I want to focus on. They have that. I mean, a coordinated parking plan is important, but as I mentioned earlier, sensors, use of technology to make sure people can find it easily so no one's frustrated is also important.
Randy.
We just also need to make sure that particularly for the civic core, that's got to have some parking there, because you just can't have as many seniors as use a community center and library. We can't deprive them of parking. There's got to be parking there. It's got to be underground. So
again, let me just again introduce this notion. I mean, we can talk all day about asking WMATA to do this or so on and so forth. Are there things we could get in here that would be asked, that would get them built into the development procedure? Things like, any developer has to produce an estimate of incremental traffic additions and how that would be dealt with the parking that exists, or whether they would, and if they can't be dealt with, whether they contribute towards whether it be more parking or subsidizing a micro transit system, such as Connie has talked about. But if we can get it into the zoning, the special zoning designation, and we can get it into the development process, we can give this thing some teeth. So I'm encouraging people to again think about this. Maybe we ought to go on. I do think that notwithstanding what Chaz said and Connie, I think about schools. One of the things about the way schools are addressed in here is that it says that any change would happen over a great deal of time. And I just point out that so does bringing on new school capacity happen over a great deal of time. So doing something more than it appears was done here, which is that maybe OP looked at the DCPS's annual facilities management plan, seems like it's in order. John.
Yeah, first of all, I don't want to say that my concern with school and school capacity should be a deterrent to affordable housing. That's not the point I wanted to make. What the point I wanted to make was I found that while OP mentioned this issue, it was discussed very lightly. The only additions to school capacity around here were Vauxhall and two schools over there. But Erkin gave me some really good information, or he gave me some links to some very, very good information, which I pursued. And one was the concurrent level of capacity utilization. The other is the annual report with the Deputy Mayor for Education, in which they discuss what's on their agenda for the next couple of years. And there's nothing in Northwest dealing with anything like the current school situation, let alone the future. So I would say if we're going to pursue, let's say, affordable housing fairly aggressively and inclusionary zoning or PUDs or whatever it might be, we should insist in our comments that DCPS and DME simultaneously study this area intensely with with an eye towards improving the capacity of this neighborhood. Those two things go hand in hand. And I think we should, it should be our advocacy role to strongly advocate for that simultaneous study rather than have the apartments built and the people moving in, and then, oh my goodness, we forgot about the schools. I think they have to be simultaneous. That would be my point.
As I said, we need to do that school analysis regardless of what happens on the avenue.
Right. And fast.
So Michael, and then we can move on to the next.
And I think DCPS is aware of this, John. I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's fine that we do this. I think capacity at Lafayette actually is under enrolled at the moment because of pandemic related issues. I don't think they're at over enrollment based on my last reading of the LSAT notes. But Randy's point is, I think, more operative, which is overcrowding Lafayette is more a result of seniors selling their property and families with 2 and 3 kids moving in. Because there's, if you think about the number of units in an ideal world that'll be developed on the avenue, it pales compared to the number of houses that'll turn over in the rest of the neighborhood. And so the question is, what is their plan for this? And we went through this in the Military Road School when we were talking about capacity for pre-K 4, desire to have 3K3, and desire of us to have them lease the ECC, which they didn't do, but now they said they can do, but now it's too late. I mean, all of this stuff, you're absolutely right, John, has to be done concurrently. But I would just point out that the development along the avenue is not going to be the biggest source of overcrowding down the line.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But if we're going to have, well,
Why don't we move on to the design issue a minute? I mean, is that all right? I mean, I think we can work with some of this in terms of drafting for look, with regard to design, I just say that in my view, their proposals after page 43 are many are fine. It's just that they have no teeth. As I say, I mean, they don't make a requirement on the developer to deal with these, that they encourage to the maximum feasible extent. Who determines feasibility? They say such and such should be encouraged. And I'm particularly concerned about 2 elements. And I guess the question I'm raising here is whether we want to put more teeth in, at least enough to say that the drafters of the zoning designation for our special zoning district should make basic elements of the now suggested design guidelines mandatory. Let me just say there are 2 elements that I think are particularly important from my point of view, and I'm interested in hearing yours. And the first is alleys. This small area plan is now drafted, assigns to alleys an immense number of tasks. Most importantly, that all loading and unloading will be done there, and all entry and exits to parking would be there. I happen to have a lot of alleys in my district, and they are about as dysfunctional as you can imagine. There is nothing about the alley designs. I just give you 2 instances. One is that if you're going to load or unload, you've got to have a turnout. Just go look at the alley, a particularly poorly designed alley behind Starbucks, Mama Lucia's, Parthenon, and Macon. It's a disaster. And so what happens? People pull in and park there just to run in and get their coffee. That messes up traffic. That messes up trash collection. people deliver from the back and they close down the alley while they're delivering. There are no alcoves for dumpsters, so that, well, there is, but it's at the very, far end. So a truck picking up trash has to go all the way in and around a corner and then somehow either go out that odd other. So I think that we just need to make them tougher, and we need to make them prescriptive. On the other area, and I just think it is one of the people I talked to at Randy's suggestion, it was a wonderful conversation, was Michael Marshall, who appeared at one of our information exchange sessions. He's the designer of, he's a quite impressive designer, including of the front building at UDC. He said that basically step downs and buffers, the big challenge in design in a place like this is how bigger commercial buildings meet lower residential buildings. And we need to be sure, we know that when we get to the community center library, that is going to be a huge issue of how bigger development meets smaller residential. And so I think there too, we ought to try to toughen this up and at least give enough authority language that the zoning drafters, which are going to include us, I hope, can work out specifics. Any comments? We're getting through this section fast.
I think we all agree with you, basically, Peter.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
just as we're approaching 9 o'clock, are we consensed around the notion that, one, and fundamentally, anything that goes forward from here on, we insist that we have a seat at the table with respect to the drafting of anything, and that, two, our resolution reflects our view that the draft small area plan needs to be strengthened with more prescriptive language around those issues that we feel are important. And are we, if we agree about that, are we then literally going to say, to Connie's point, you write 3.5, I'm just making the number up, where you encourage, are we going to say in our resolution, instead of encourage, we are going to say we require, we insist, we expect? I mean, what just, I'm just trying to get
fair enough. So I think what we're trying to do here, my own sense is that we should not be bound by the specific language of the SAP, because if we are bound by it, then we're really under an obligation to go through paragraph by paragraph and say, this word should be changed to that word. And we simply can't do it in the time we've got, right? I mean,
which is why, Peter, I said we should start off by saying no.
I know, Michael. I've got it. One of the things you said at the very beginning of your remarks just now is that, are we consensed around the idea that we're at any table where further decisions are made? Saying my argument is saying no assures us we're not at that table. So what I'm trying to do, following the guidance of the lawyers I've talked to over the last few weeks, is to be sure that whatever the language is here, that we fix some of the language, but that we be sure that there's authorizing language for the drafters of the zoning designation to bear down on specific areas. My own argument, and this is to John's point, is that what the example I gave with the second document that I sent, which is the 76 question areas, is that we say we should not see, no one should see our a conditional approval as relieving OP of looking at these, cleaning up these areas. I'm trying to find a strategy where we don't go through line by line, because I just don't think we'll get a resolution done in time. I mean, we'll make the Murray resolution look like chump change if we have to go through line by line. So,
Hang on. Really?
We could do a throwdown match now about John.
Yes, right now, all of you know just about as much as I know about form-based zones. I've done a little bit of research. I saw Ellen McCarthy on the historic Chevy Chase panel, which Chaz moderated. And I'm not trying to be evangelical about it, about that particular concept. It just struck me as a reasonable technique to use in the future. I think we can use a two-step process. We can put into our comments to OP all of as many as we want of changes, improvements, deficiencies, etc. And you're right, we don't have to rewrite the DC code in the next 10 days. But if we put in that in our response that we think this form-based code thing is a good thing to look at, and especially since they introduced it themselves on their own document on page 59, we're then building on a concept that they actually introduced, which was kind of new to me, maybe not as new to me as it is. I mean, not Peter knew more about this as well. But at any rate, that particular concept involves all the details that we're looking for. So if we get that vehicle into our feedback to OP, that is, as I mentioned in my memo, that's not radical, it's not confrontational. It looks like a legitimate tool to explore. After exploring it, we may determine that no, that's not going to work for us. But it is a way of keeping us in the game, not and at the table, because the creation of such a form-based code involves heavy public engagement, including the ANC, Citizens Association, whatever. Briefly, I looked at the one that they used, the Hill Project. That was a little bit different because they used a master plan because a lot of the land was vacant. But nonetheless, it was a huge amount of public input into that process over in Southeast. So I think, I think that is a mechanism, and I agree with Peter. Let's put in. We don't have to say, well, we think the doorways should be 5.5 inches wide and 11.5 inches tall. But when it comes to design stuff, like Connie's talking about, but we can put in the mechanism which assures this commission and future commissions and the public in general, a way to keep engaged in the process. So that's why I would favor that mechanism. But there is a way. As I said, we don't have to rewrite the code in 10 days. But we should put in there not just an aspirational idea that we should be engaged. We have an actual tool that's being used all over the country where you can maintain that engagement. So that's my spiel on zones.
John, I mean, I actually propose this in the next step. So I think I got a perfect place for it. I mean, so maybe we ought to go on to the next step, and then there are just two small things after that. Let me just do the setup this way. During this conversation, and certainly during the year plus that we've been dealing with this issue, there's been a lot of talk about the character of the community and keeping the character of the community. I think a lot of that is a proxy for saying we're worried about overdevelopment and insensitive development. And a proxy for that in lots of the conversation that we've had with our constituents, we've had with each other, is height. I would just say that the draft plan as it exists today has only 2 mentions of height. They are on page, with a number attached to them. They are on page 53. In the legend, the x-axis legend, saying that talking about potential multifamily mixed use, max 50 to 65 feet. I want to make a proposal that may well be controversial, but it tries to take bows in I suggest this as something that we seek in our resolution to put into this plan. It tries to both give all sides something with the aim that we get some firm fix on a height limit. The idea is that we would try to strike a balance between streamlining the process for new developments and setting the limits. And the proposal I have, and is in the document that the attendees can see, is that for a proposed building of up to 45 feet in height that complies with the letter of a set of community and OP authored form-based code requirements, similar to but stronger than the draft plan building guidelines, the proposal can advance without further zoning or ANC approval. 45 feet is 5 feet above what the current zoning allows as matter of right. For a proposed building that meets all the same requirements, but also directs for a percentage of square footage, and a percentage that we can determine, if we determine it's 30 or 50 or whatever it is, to affordable housing as the ANC defines it, the height limit could rise to 60 feet, and again, could be built without further zoning or ANC approval. 60 feet is 5 feet below the standard height for the zoning designation OP has said is most likely to be approved for the Upper Connecticut Avenue, absent. It's a give on the community's part over existing zoning, and a give on OP's part over where they think zoning is going. For everything over 60 feet, the proposal will have to undergo a full public scrub, zoning, ANC, community hearings, the whole works. So this is where, John, I would put form-based code, but it would be written with us at the table. And one of the things I've said to you in conversations is that it will take time to write. We need to, if I understand what the lawyers have said to me, we need to have enough in the resolution and in the plan that it authorizes the zoning drafters to work on this plan, but it will take time. One thing you should know about the Hill East public input is that it started in March of 2004 and it ended in, where is it, June of 2000, it's probably in April of 2009. It is not something we can write here. But it's something that we could create the authority for the zoning drafters to say that this needs to be devised and put into the designation for our district. My proposal, I'm interested in reaction. Don.
Yeah, I would support that. I think as long as we sort of get our nose under the tent, so to speak, that there's a topic that we feel strongly which should be pursued. You know, I think that would be enough. You know what I know about Hill East is what I read 2 hours before I joined this seminar. That was a little bit different though, in the sense that they had a lot of vacant land, so they went through a master planning process before they even got to the form-based process. So a chunk of time was raised by that. As long as we get the notion of these mechanisms in place in the context of continuing public engagement, I think, you know, to me, I'm not a lawyer, but I think as long as we get these in our response, in our comments, that gives us the leverage to pursue this in whatever mechanism is appropriate, whether it's a PUD or a form-based code or whatever it might be. We just want to get our oar in the water so that these issues are not overlooked and we're not run over by processes that we have no control over. So I would favor Peter's approach.
Any other reaction? Just to say, I'm gonna, whoever we put together to work on the draft, if it's silence, I'm gonna try to write it up. So, you know, I mean, if you think it's a terrible idea, let me know now so I have less work. Yeah, Michael.
Peter, I can just say that I'm agnostic. I don't know what, I can't sort out what we're giving up by your proposal. I'm sorry to say I don't know enough to have an opinion about it. So I can't say, when you say if it's only this number of feet, then we say God bless and they go forward. And if
Two
it's
things. If it's only this number of feet and they meet
And
these strict criteria, you can't. I mean, the thing about form-based, essentially, it seems to me that the thing about form-based is it has the advantage that there are strict rules. It has the disadvantage that there are strict rules. So that I can just hear designers saying, this is crimping my style. You'll only get
But I guess the reason I'm agnostic on it is I haven't researched this, but I haven't seen the data that reflects how this works in practice. If for example, a form-based approach means that if there's an approved form for the city somehow, that gives the architects and the builders carte blanche to do what they will within the form, maybe that's good, or maybe there's too much latitude that can be built into that form, and that we divesting ourselves of the authority to review it as ANC is not wise. It's sort of hard to know without seeing how it's worked over a period of time in a variety of contexts for me to know whether this is good or bad.
It's fair enough, and actually, I think that its use so far is very minimal nationwide. But I guess one argument for doing this is that we now don't have much authority over building below 40 feet in the area we're talking about in the commercial district. So the give there is 5 feet, and what we don't have in this plan is we can't say to our constituents, the limit without full public scrub is X. You're never going to see a building other than this, or it's going to come before you if they try to build it that big. And we just can't say it now. I mean, it's not in there. And so I'm trying to get it in there. And I guess the other argument for it is, look, we have to be politically realistic. I mean, we've got a huge pressure on this community to do something about affordable housing and to give some ground on streamlining the development process. And this is a give where we get some limits. Anyways, Randy or Connie, I saw you up in the district. Okay. I think the way to do this probably is my contribution to the drafting team will be to try something out on you a little more detailed and but again, the aim here is not to bring to you within the next 4 days, a code, right? It's to get enough language in the resolution and in the small area plan that the zoning directors enjoy. I just want to bring.
So Peter, to this point, though, it may be that the language is it should be considered or studied or evaluated or something, as opposed to
well, or something a little more powerful, like only if such a plan, only if such provisions can be drafted, will there be a streamlined version to 45 feet or 60 feet with affordable housing. I mean, just something. If they can't cook it up, then we just shouldn't give, right? So. Okay. Let me just offer 2 other things, and then we ought to just get. I mean, I think that I hope that Randy will assign some people to work on drafting. But I mean, so 2 other things I want to propose as part of the resolution is, look, just think over the last year and a half, just think about the last few months, how many zoning issues we've dealt with. I mean, it just consumed us, right? And so I think we really ought to get some commissioners who are bearing down on this and building up expertise. So I propose that we establish a standing zoning development and design subcommittee to oversee the issues as they come up and the operation of the new zone and to review designs. And the other thing which I've said before is I think that it is wise, and actually it's about you, Michael, that I think we need to put in that we understand nothing in our resolution or the small area plan to preclude an appropriately supported historic district, either on the west side of Connecticut Avenue or more broadly. I think we need to tease the two things apart to get through this process, and this is a way to do it, to leave open the door for that. So, Randy, what about drafting?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and what I would suggest is Peter has done a lot of the work on this, and Connie's worked really hard on it. Chaz, if you would be willing, you've done some thinking about this as well. If you could work with Connie and Peter on this to try to come up with a draft in a week.
I've been listening and taking notes, and I think maybe together we can try to put something that will reflect what the group has talked about.
Great, thank you.
That would be great. And this is really important for our community. It's really important for the commission forward. So I appreciate the efforts that all of you have put into it. And it has been, despite the fact that Peter and Connie have been leading the charge, all of us have been very heavily involved in this process. Can I ask one other question too about tomorrow's hearing? I didn't see anything to indicate that it's going to be recorded or broadcast.
It's gonna be live streamed.
It's going to be live
It's going
streamed.
to be, yes, Jerry Mallett's asked OP, and it will be live streamed.
They haven't published that, have
But
they?
they haven't published, exactly. So I think we need, I went to their website. It says it's going to be live streamed. They will definitely produce a transcript of everyone's comments.
What I was
We need
hoping
yeah.
is that if it's going to be live streamed, that more than one of us can watch it tomorrow. And I think that's really important that we pay
You
attention
have
to.
to.
Well, maybe we ought to make assignments, because I've got a 5 o'clock appointment, so I can do 2 to 4.
Well, I was going to volunteer for that period too, because
I'm going to watch the whole thing.
There are 15 people signed up at 3 minutes each. You'll be late if you're there at 3:10.
There are only 15 people signed up?
Yes.
well, we'll see how many people turn up. I think OP is planning to just be there for the entire 5 hours.
Yeah.
And anybody who shows up, even if they haven't registered in advance, can speak.
Yeah.
And I suspect they will, if there are not a lot of people there, they're not going to be really tight about the 3 minutes. So I think it is important for us to be sure we cover all of that tomorrow, though. And I do have some other commitments later in the afternoon, so I can do it from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock or so, 4:30. But
Well, why don't we double team it? And
Okay.
then can somebody else take 5 to 6 and 6 to 7?
I'm going to be listening to the whole thing. So if I'm going to ask Erican to post it, the live streaming kind of link.
Yeah.
I was going to try to just sit there myself, just go in person and sit and listen.
I'm going to go in person, but I just can't. I got to leave
Yeah.
at 4:30. So.
okay,
Yeah.
Connie, if you get the live stream, could you send it around to
Yeah.
the rest of us?
I'm going to send him an email right now, right
Okay.
after our meeting. I'm going to say, give it to us. Give
I was
it.
going to try to show up between 5 and 7. I've got a meeting that goes till
Yeah.
5.
Uh-oh.
The last part of this, we may have a hard time covering, but
Yeah, we'll be there to listen. And plus they said that they would produce a transcript that they'll post on their website. So if there's only a few people testifying, this transcript will be easy, and then we'll be able to see it.
right.
So, yeah. But they're
Okay.
there from 2 to 7. So it could be a lull of 2 hours and no one's there and no one's saying anything, and it could be like a lot of people coming in. They're just trying to put that big ban so that people have a chance.
Randy, if I could come back to our process. Our goal is to have something produced by next Monday, because we have to post something on our website a week before our meeting,
Right?
Yes.
which means that we need to have some consensus about what that is before Monday.
Yep.
And I wonder what the timing ought to be between now
Well,
and then.
if we could circulate drafts as we've done in the past. That would be the best, I think. And, whenever there are portions of the draft that can be circulated, that would be preferable. So we don't have to do it all at once.
Mhm.
And, if we need an administrative meeting or something like that, we can schedule it. But let's see how we do.
Okay.
Do the two of you want to come over to the house at some point tomorrow? What are your schedules like? Connie and Jess.
Well, tomorrow's the public hearing, so we could only
Oh,
come in
Jesus.
the morning. Yeah, so I think I know. So originally,
Bring your laptop and sit
Randy,
in the pew.
yeah. So originally, Randy, we did talk about like having the public meeting on the 9th and then having maybe a special meeting on the 11th just to vote on the draft before the 13th. I don't know if we want to do that, but I think we should aim for the 9th. We should aim for having the resolution discussed on the 9th, which means we're aiming for May 2nd to have the draft resolution to the public. We need to do our best. So we have to figure out structure. Okay, so I have some ideas.
I'll leave that to give you. We don't
Right,
need
so
to.
the three of us should talk in the morning. We should talk in the morning, okay, about structure and how to
Okay.
do it. And once we figure out structure, we can get it in.
Coffee at 9:30?
Yeah, coffee at 9:30 is fine. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, we could all pull our car into the alley behind Starbucks, block it up, so and
Stop.
get the coffee, come back here. So, no, I'm sorry. All right. Are we going to let people talk, or are we going to go on to the rest of the meeting?
Well, a lot of people have put stuff in comments in the Q&A. And so I think unless somebody's got a really pressing need to speak tonight and wants to raise their hand. And again, we encourage any detailed comments that you want to provide to us. That would be very helpful. I don't see any hands raised. Okay. We'll go on to the next item in the agenda, which is a report on the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee. And this is really easy because we had a meeting on April 19th, and the topic was a small area plan. And so there was a lot of discussion there, a lot of strong feelings about what should be included. And there were two members of the standing committee who were volunteered, I guess they volunteered, to put together a draft of something for the standing committee to offer to the commission as their recommendations. And I haven't gotten anything further from them, but they're very aware of the timeline and that we need to get something very quickly if we're going to have any influence on the resolution. So hopefully we'll get some further input from them and we'll pass it along. That's all I've got to report on there. Any questions?
No, I mean, I attended too, so I've got the gist.
Right.
I mean, I can give you the gist of what they said, the drafters. So, okay.
Okay. Michelle has indicated that she hadn't been able to see the chat because some people are just posting the chat to address to host and panelists. I should have made it clear that you should do that to everyone, that the chat should go to everyone. And I don't know, did we that setting, Connie, so that you can't see everyone?
No, well, there are some people like across all of our meetings who just want to provide comments to us.
Yeah.
But what I have done, though, in the past is for every one of our meetings, I've just posted it all because the whole thing, because I mean, unless it's like something between us, like maybe I'll say to Lisa, did you get this? Remove this person. I mean, I don't think that should be in it. But even if I've said something to someone else in it's not, I'm not revealing anything personal, let's say, then I've just posted it. I mean,
Okay.
and I think, and I think part of it is that people just want to say something to us and tell us something. But then when I have the log, I just reveal it because there's nothing that no one can see. And there are people who've been disapproving and approving and just giving us information. So that's just made public. So no one feels like, there's anything happening
Okay.
that they can't
Okay,
see.
but a lot of these comments are by Ron Eichner. I mean, he's never been shy, so I don't know why, you might want to.
Oh. Anyway, it's all taken care of. We're gonna post the chat and the Q&A. So things are gonna be public.
Yep, all of them,
Okay,
all of
let's-
them. I have copied and pasted, and I will do that. And once Peter puts out the, gives us this
Okay.
processed YouTube video recording, it'll be there.
Okay. Let's go to commission business then. I think we can go through this quickly. We have the minutes for the March 28th meeting that Peter has circulated. At least Connie and I have had some comments on those. Any other comments from any of the other commissioners? Okay, we can-
I've taken all your edits and I will circulate that. I owe
Okay.
you the 11th and now this meeting too. But at
Right.
least I'm only 2 back instead of at one point we had
Right.
4 down.
Okay, so I move that we adopt the minutes for the March 28th meeting. All those in favor? 7-0, okay. John, any checks that need to be approved? Or any other treasurer business? You're muted. You're muted, John. John, you're muted.
Hey, can somebody unmute him?
Oh, I could unmute him. I could do that.
Okay, I'm here.
All right. Okay. Wait, no, wait, he's not here again. What happened?
Oh.
It's okay.
Can you do it in sign?
Okay,
Okay, work. All right.
I have a motion to approve a check to Verizon due May 2nd, 2022 for $162.56. So I'd like to move that.
All those in favor? 7-0, okay.
And then we have our quarterly ANC financial report, which is due, actually was due today, but we'll have it done in a day or two. But I just want to have approval for that. I have a motion, which I will read.
And you'll send to me, right?
Yeah, I sent all of these to you,
Okay.
Peter, so, but just for the record, a motion to approve the ANC 3G quarterly financial report for the second fiscal quarter of 2022 with a final balance of $26,052.95 and a restatement of approval for fully budgeted payments during the second quarter of fiscal 22 as follows. 3 payments to Randy Speck for $222.58 each for Zoom services, 2 payments to Verizon for $155.76 each, and 1 for $62.88. $25 for the ANC Security Fund, $2,000 for the Citizens Association, $1,989 to the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club, and $61.48 to Michael Zeldin for ANC signage. So I move approval of that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? 7-0, okay.
Okay, I will have to run around and get some checks and get that form signed tomorrow
Okay.
if possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, John.
I'm sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
For our next meeting on May 9th, we cleared the decks so that it's going to be devoted entirely, I think, to our resolution on a small area plan. There are a number of other items that are in the queue now for later meetings, but we're going to reserve this meeting just for that. John?
I have one item for a homeowner, Josh Downing, who will be for a BZA approval on a small addition to his house, and they can come and make their presentation. It's fairly routine, but this is the most convenient schedule for them. So if we could put them on the agenda for just a few minutes.
Okay, all right.
I'll send you a memo.
Okay, great. I'll put that on the agenda then. Okay, I think that's it. Appreciate it. I think it was a good discussion tonight and appreciate everyone's contributions. And we look forward to Peter and Connie and Chaz's draft. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Peter.
Bye, everyone. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Peter. Thanks, everyone. Bye.